people were born, it was like an ethics class. Evil, or if it was
nurture.
Yeah. I don't remember what I wrote.
Where did it land?
I think I might have written that people were born evil.
I agree.
Yeah, but I'd have to go. I probably still have the paper somewhere.
Well, I wouldn't say you're born evil. I believe that too from my faith, original sin. But at the same time, if you just look at kid, like you're all ego, you're selfish. You don't care about anyone else. Yeah. Like, Where does that cross for you with the concept of like free will versus determination? I think free will still exists. I think that's a precondition of as we come into the world. And as you develop, you have a choice. On how you handle that. And it comes from your parents at that moment too, right? Like, how do I parent this child and bring them into, because that's where the nurture comes in, in the social learning theory. I learned from what's around me. And then that's why you have parents who say, you have to share, right? And you begin to break that down, but it's also tied into the free will of the parent on how they're going to train up that child, which scriptures will say, train up a child in which way they should go, and they shall not depart from it, which is used in the scriptures. And so it's recognizing that, look, like you can't get this right anyway. So here, we're going to show you a way to do it.
This makes me go down a path that scares me to go down in terms of the political fight of like the Christian right and like progressive liberals of like keeping the family whole and anti-abortion and all of that and that is like
I agree with you, and I think that
and the whole the message is like that it's faith-based morals, right, versus science, but maybe science could be telling us something different. I don't know.
I think what was really fascinating, the what's his last name? I'm going to say Vishanka, and it's not Vishanka.
It's this again.
The brother running for president.
Oh yeah, it does begin with a V. Yes,
Mr. V.
Yeah,
President,
Mr. V,
candidate V, not to be confused
like
with
Vishryanka or something like that.
Yeah. So I watched his town hall forum.
Yeah,
because I'd be nerding out, and he was talking, and he said a lot of crazy stuff.
Now, it's okay.
So I was watching it, but it was interesting to your point. They asked him because he's Hindu, and they were like, well, do you think that plays a part, Americans, Christian nation, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, well, I am Hindu, but I would say that I adhere to more Christian values than most of the people that proclaim to be Christian that are running anyway. It's about the values. And he's like, just because they proclaim it doesn't mean they have the values. I was like, bro, this dude talking real talk though.
That is true, yeah.
Right? Like, so.
Well, I've now, as of the last week, I said to Mario that oh,
shoot. You know how he does. He just puts his.
Well, this is a little bit of a non-tech, but this is a good start to our more relevant, what we're supposed to be talking about. We have the podcast before the podcast.
Behind the scenes.
I've been, I'm a typically like half glass full person.
Sure.
And I'm not cynical. Like, I actually think I need to be more cynical in my
really?
life. Yeah, absolutely. Man. Like, I'm totally deferential, super diplomatic, like very deferential to people.
Gotcha. I really need 15 grand personally.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a story of what I did last night, but it drives my wife crazy. She's like, you don't need to be doing this for everybody all the time. And I'm like, I have zero control over it. It just happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I've been like a little curmudgeon-y cranky lately, and it is driven by maybe a couple of things, predominantly my frustration with our local, state, and federal governments right now.
Yeah.
And I've just come to this. Right now, my sullenness and solace is lying in the fact that like maybe we do live in a simulation, and it's just a failed experience that scientists abandoned 50 years ago, and they were like, just keep it running and see what happens, and that we have just gone amok. And
to make serious something you're making light of, but isn't that what America is? It was an experiment.
Yeah, I suppose.
We have no idea. We have no idea. We're supposed to get closer.
We're supposed to be closer.
That's close. It's not that close. Right here.
So
This is it.
Yes, the family podcast. Hello.
I don't know. When I feel this is intense. This is intense.
It's like one of those like things that you have to like look into each other's eyes. He's like, stop being awkward on a Friday, you two nerds.
But yeah, it really is. It was an experiment that was built off of compromise.
Yeah.
And I think the idea that folks still look at the Constitution as this infallible, perfect document is silly. People make compromises to get it done, right? The big goal was to get out from England's rule. So whatever else needed to happen over here, we'll deal with that later. Well, We're still dealing with it.
I think that's what I'm feeling, and I think maybe our ominous setting, although the blue skies are coming out, so maybe that's a sign to cheer up, MB. Just moments before we started recording, it was like Armageddon out there.
It was terrible. I'm soaked. My pants wet.
But this is New England, so you don't like the weather. Just wait a minute.
Draws soaked.
So the ominous feeling is probably appropriate as at the local level, and this is not just true at the local level. It's at every level. Is this idea of compromise and consensus and diplomacy? I feel like it's out the window right now, and at the federal level, like we're facing a looming potential federal shutdown. Which for a community action agency is very concerning.
So would that mean whatever federal funding, y'all wouldn't get that neither?
No, I mean, the federal government would basically go on furlough, and unless they do a continuing resolution to keep level funds, if they do a complete government shutdown, it's possible that they do it without any continuing, because there's no budget. That's what will lead. There's no budget compromise right now. So at midnight, at the stroke of midnight on October 1st, it's possible that the federal government could shut down. And we've faced shutdowns before, and it was 2018, 2019. I think it was 20 something days. But when you're running a nonprofit and you're largely rely on public dollars. That's as we are going into, we have a board meeting on Monday to talk about our, approving our FY24 budget. We have to have a contingency for worst case, what's going to happen, because we won't get those contracts right away. Yeah. Until there is either a continuing resolution or an actual budget. Yeah. And then we won't know. So
this is the same conversation, similar on a smaller scale that I'm having though. Right. So you think about you guys as a larger nonprofit and us as a smaller nonprofit. But you were on the call. And I'm sure other folks deal with this wherever they are. The idea that the city of Worcester wanted us to grow our services under the Safe and Successful Youth Initiative by, $100,000. But on my end, exactly, like me and my board are looking at the fact like, okay, so the contracts might not be, like there's no contract between the state and the city yet.
Right.
And then the city then has to turn around and issue me a contract to me.
Yeah.
Right. That's all supposed to happen by October 1st.
Right.
But during that whole time, I'm expected to continue to provide services. But I don't know if I'm going to, there's not even a guarantee I'm going to get paid. Like in faith, you trust that all the process will work out.
Right.
But I'm not going to overextend my ability to keep a positive cash flow.
Right, because you're trying to also keep people employed.
Naturally. Yeah. And that was an interesting thing too, specifically with that grant that was on a yearly basis, was even at that point, if October comes, by the time we get to contract sign, maybe it's the end of October. Now I'm trying to find employees through November and December. Maybe I find someone, bring them on in January, get them acclimated 90 days. Let's say they're a fit.
Right. If they're fit.
Right. Yeah. So now we're talking March. And then 2 months after that, we're back in a conversation about, is the state going to approve this budget again? I don't know. There's no contracts. They may not come for 2, 3, 4 months.
And you're not going to be able to spend the budget you projected because you only brought that person on in 2 months later. So you have the vacancy element of that. So you got to figure that out too.
I got to figure out.
And then you get in trouble if you don't.
Why didn't you do that? Why'd you put that in there?
Yeah.
And so from my perspective as a leader, that's a challenge, right? Because it's like, oh, here's an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because those are the cost reimbursement grants.
Right.
That for a small.
Live or die by. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't have the unrestricted dollars, to be able to float those, part of why our partnership was so helpful in the beginning.
I will admit that in the transition part of us moving away from lead as SSYI, which is what how our relationship started relative to LL, and our ability to advance that cash to LL in the beginning, which helped, bridge that gap. I have some guilt that we're not going to be able to continue to do that and bridge that. Although I actually think there might be some ways we could do that, but it'd be more of a circuitous contracting process that the city and state probably wouldn't go for. But I'm concerned about that element missing now, because that is something you've raised in the conversation of like, how can we guarantee at least a 45-day payment,
Yeah.
And that's, you haven't had to worry about that for a few years.
No, we haven't.
In this contract, in that contract. Yeah.
Yeah. But also for me, I'm wired this way, right? So not everyone is, but when you're the director and you've got employees, you feel that pressure. So, we got to go find the money, Right. There's all right, what do we got to do? And in some ways I feel like the bird getting pushed out of the nest now. It's like, all right, with a teenager, time to fly. And so yes, it will allow us to stay comfortable and continue to do that. But in some ways it is motivating and pushing to say, all right.
Well, you're also, you have grown in the size of your agency and you have more diverse set of funds now that you're over a million, right? We should be. Well, if this contract happens, and so you're at a size now where that risk is a little lesser than it was 2 years ago, and being able to, by appropriate GAAP principles, like reclassify things if you need to. But that's where even smaller organizations can't do that.
But at this point too, we're less nimble.
Yeah.
Right. So when it was 3 of us, I could be like, "Hey guys, we might not get a paycheck this week."
Yeah. Yeah.
You got 9 families that are counting on that payroll to come through. That's a different pressure.
You're a business now. You're like not that you weren't legit before, but you are actually more structurally business oriented.
Yeah. So that component weighs into this as well. Like when I look at the bank account, unfortunately, we were able to get a line of credit. We, had some strategies to kind of work through that, which is common practice in nonprofit management. Well, at least small nonprofits. And so we got the line of credit to be able to float us for a little bit. But there's some days I look at the bank account and I'm like, dude, I've got this many months. I've got this many weeks of overhead, right? In there right now. Yeah. There's other resources coming, right? That will offset that, but there's some days like that.
And we were talking before we started recording about this article that I had shared from, I think it was governing.com. Right?
Yeah. How do you be fun? Do you have what was on governing.com?
First of all, you're constantly alluding to things that I have to go Google or buy a book on or something. No, actually, Jonathan Cohen from the Great Worcester Foundation forwarded me this link. So ask him why he's on governing.com.
It's tied in. Yeah.
Yes. Jonathan, what are you subscribing to? But the premise of it was how some states, and in particular focused on this state senator in Maryland that created this NIMBLE, NIMBLE, BL
acronym as always.
That essentially is a bridge for nonprofits to be able to address cost reimbursement.
Up to $25,000 they can pull.
The irony is that it's a state-funded project this state senator from Maryland is simultaneously trying to push legislation to address how nonprofits are paid with state funds. But in the meantime, I think that even just the acknowledgement and recognition of that need, because we talked about this, I think in one of the previous episodes, is we run businesses that have a different tax code, but we run businesses, and for WCAC, we have a $400,000 payroll tax that contributes back to the economy. We are in a downtown urban area where I just bought a sandwich at the deli down the street.
What'd you get?
I got just kind of turkey wrap.
Turkey wrap.
I just went late today.
So sorry.
I do love a chicken salad sandwich.
I didn't eat.
I ate because I was worried that I was going to be really hungry during this conversation and I didn't want to feel like woozy.
Gotcha. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Is a hot dog a sandwich? Oh, hot dogs are gross.
Yeah.
I didn't know, though. Incoming digression, Mario. American cheese, my favorite cheese.
It's not real.
It's the hot dog of cheeses.
It is. This is not real.
Yeah, I'm not a big hot dog fan, but I do love American cheese.
White or yellow?
White. Although, yeah,
You don't like the colored cheese?
I don't like unpackaging the cheese. I just like my stacked cheese. If it's yellow stacked cheese, I'm in for that.
Gotcha.
I just don't like the over packaging.
Yeah, that's true.
Another theme, the over packaging. But just back to the state center in Maryland. She's proposed this idea that we ought to be treating nonprofits like businesses in the procurement and payment process, because, let's say a state contract hires a construction firm, right, to build a road or whatever. There's no way that a business would be able to do it. No, you couldn't. You just couldn't do that.
They would front
why treat a nonprofit the same way that? As a government, you are heavily reliant on providing social services.
Right.
In Massachusetts right now, across the state, community action agencies and tons of other nonprofits, for example, are doing a lot of lead coordination in support for the influx of Haitian migrants coming to getting dropped off at hotels across the state.
Unbelievable.
And the request is in the expectations that nonprofits will respond to that. And of course we are.
Yeah.
At the same time, our line item that we use to help support that for WCAC, we're not leading the coordination as an agency. We have staff that are very involved, but we're helping provide some meals at a couple of the hotels and some gift cards. But we're using a state line item that has been vetoed. That won't, at the moment, unless there's an override, we're not going to have that resource anymore. But yet the expectation as a nonprofit is that can you please help us and respond? And that would not fly in the business community. It's a great point, but I always think of the responsibility. I'm like a extreme ownership type guy as well. So to what point or to what degree do you believe that the nonprofit, like us as nonprofits, have bought into that mindset? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's sometimes I feel like they take advantage of our compassion and our willingness to do this work, right? Like to stand up and be like, I'm not doing that. Yeah. I think because we're wired to put need first. Yeah. That is your answer, is we're not going to leave people behind. Yeah. In that, whether it's, migrants newly arriving, or, families that that are generations from our area of territory that where we serve, that are in need of, whether it's fuel or housing or whatever it is, that need comes first. I know. I hear you. Yeah. I don't disagree. I'm wondering, so there was a movie back in the day, The Green Mile. Yes. Yeah. And oh my gosh, what? Check the box. I got one reference that you've made. Yes, not The Green Mile. About neuroscience. Yeah. No, it's not. This is The Green Mile. And then The Green Mile, there is that guy died. I know. Yeah. What was his name? Michael Duncan? Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah. Something like that? Yeah. I'm not sure. He's big. Yeah. He's a big guy. Yeah. Handsome dude. But in the movie, it starts off, there's these two young kids, and then there's this kind of creep dude, and he uses the love of one brother to the other one gets killed, because he's like, if you scream, then I'll kill your brother, and if you scream, I'll kill your brother, and he kills both of them. Why am I sharing all this, and what does it have to do? It's almost like that. Like, I'm going to use your love for people against you. Yeah. Like, you're going to go do it, because you will. I know you'll put the need of people before you're going to go do it. Yeah. It's like, what do they call Stockholm syndrome? Oh no. That's when you fall in love with your captor. That's a very, that's a different. Well, we have to express some amor to our funders in that way. That's true. In terms of not, it's a delicate conversation to be upset over not getting a state line item. I'm not going to tick off the people who make those decisions, who simultaneously are also helping us with other things too, Which is another point, right? Like, you have to navigate those relationships in a way, because they are your lifeblood, right? And so the ability, like a business, I'll go find business somewhere else.
Like,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Like, here's the proposal.
Yeah.
Take it, leave it. I'll find it somewhere else. And we don't always have that capability to take that position.
True. Yes. And I think, well, our other options are, in terms of diversifying our funding portfolio, is to not be as heavily reliant on public funding, but then move towards philanthropy. But of course, we're challenged by that in terms of scale of philanthropy. There's not millions of dollars coming into one singular nonprofit per se.
Right.
And I think there's also challenges with philanthropy, bouncing from idea to idea. And to your earlier point is like pushing the bird out of the nest is, get you started foundational funding, and then you have to figure out how to sustain yourself,
I also support that in this idea, and I know this may be controversial, but as a business, you need administrative staff to run a business.
Yes. We're facing a very challenging conversation right now with a public funder that is not allowing us to charge indirect on I don't know how, we have a finance department that does all of that. Like, what are we supposed to do?
Right.
How do you want us to fund that work that's required to be done for the purposes of also being compliant in a highly functioning operation? You don't want to help support the staff that actually helps do that.
We're right at a position where we could use dollars for an operations director. And so if you want me to not be so dependent on your money, then I need to hire a development director.
Right. And that's always a cost center. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a cost, and I'm not going to pay for the development director, right? That's the engine, that's the fuel
right.
in the engine. So I want you to drive this car, but I'm not going to let you get gas. You got to make your own gas.
Yes. Right. That is the good analogy. Right? Yeah. It's a world, and the ebbs and flows of it is there in the inconsistency of applying rules and regulations on that. So the same funder that is not allowing us to do this on one state contract.
Or under a different one, you can.
We just did under a different one down the hall.
Yeah. Why is that complicated?
I don't know. I question, and that's where my curmudgeon-y sullenness has come from the last couple of weeks.
It just seems unfair.
I think the blue moon had something to do with it. We've mentioned Carrie Brennan before. I don't know if you can see her.
Oh, she can see you across the way?
Do you see her right now?
I can't. I can only see her hand. I can't see all of her.
If I can describe, her feet are up on her desk and she's pretend smoking a pen. Just to get a rise out of that.
Well, what I would say is I would stay away from the black ink. The blue ink is a much better high. The blue ink is a much better high.
Yes. If she's not careful, she's going to be coming in here.
She might be on the podcast.
Yes. Well, and Carrie is a great example. Carrie's our COO. We've talked about her, that everyone needs a Carrie Brennan in their life.
I need a Carrie Brennan.
And that's what you're talking about, right? And so the federal funding that we might get, that we might not get if there's a shutdown, help support my role, her role, et cetera. And that's a necessary role to keep us doing the things that we're doing, So
this is to pivot the conversation a little bit, because we told folks we were going to talk about innovative ways to solve complex problems.
Yes, yeah.
So
other than complaining about it. Complaining is not innovative. No,
well, it's a good start. It sets a platform for discussion.
Yes.
So, what ways? I think that when we think about that, I think I don't know how it would work, but could nonprofits share? Like, especially as you're small, like, can we split the cost on an operations person?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, are there ways to do that? Could you contract out? I know you guys are at a whole size. You need someone directly for it, but like, hey, we'll give you, 20% of this person's hours to help you with this.
That does happen. That exists. And it happens in a couple of different ways. And, we as an agency, as connected to this conversation, have been thinking about, well, what tools and vehicles do we have as an agent, as a nonprofit in the local ecosystem to pay more attention to that? So how do we replicate the relationship, the partnership, and replicate the tools and the levers that we used in that, like the cash advancement and that kind of stuff. The partnership, the subcontracting vehicle, fiscal agencies, and fiscal sponsorship are tools to do that too.
Because you guys are doing that for the coalition as well.
Currently,
right?
for the Coalition for Healthy Greater Worcester, and Zero Fair Task Force has, so our back office, our finance office, facilitates all the invoicing and the revenue and expense that come in for in and out for those fiscal sponsorships. But I actually have a colleague from when I worked at the Mass Clean Energy Center when it was a new sort of startup agency. He was a contract CFO, and he was shared by multiple quasi agencies as the CFO until we were big enough to have our own CFO.
I'd love to hear about that. If you are doing something like that where you're sharing an executive or you're sharing an administrative, comment, put it in the comments. Let us hear about it. Talk to us about that, man. We'd love to hear more places where people are sharing administrative or operational costs that are usually not covered under or hard to get covered under grants.
And that happens from HR, payroll, fiscal, legal, IT. That's actually happening in this building that we're in right now. So a number of nonprofits that used to be at the Denholm building right over there moved into this new facility at 18 Chestnut Street. And the idea behind us primarily being nonprofit tenants is to sort of build this nonprofit center of excellence. And that it starts with the use of like co-space. So we have shared building facilities in terms of
bathrooms,
conference rooms, and things like that. Much like third sector New England, like working space.
Yeah.
But there are tenants in the building who, as a result of the move, decided...
You should call a exterminator if you have 10 ants in the building.
10 ants. So there it is. There it is, right there. There's the dad joke. Expired.
So you have tenants in the building.
Yes. And they, so
bad.
And I don't even know, like, the summer pants, and then the tenants. Like, I don't hear myself even say it. What else can I be saying? Sure. Yeah. It reminds me of this SNL Jeopardy thing with Sean Connery. Anyway, so...
That's classic. Sean Connery. Yeah, Will Ferrell and Sean Connery is classic. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So Colin Quinn was Sean Connery.
Yes, many had them. Are you going to maybe edit this one out?
I'm going to call it 10 ants.
10 ants. But there are tenants in the building who, upon moving here, agreed to share their IT. So the... IT department of one of the agent organizations is doing IT for at least one other, if not two other, in the building. So that shared cost, proportional shared cost. And we had talked about that for other things. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential for like ordering and supplies and things like that, that level of procurement.
Yep.
It saves time and money and through efficiency, certainly.
I hear that. Yeah. I hear that. That because I would imagine it starts to your point, dissolve potentially barriers between, because the reality is sometimes, especially if you're working in similar spaces, and when I say similar spaces, similar causes, it can be like, are you infringing on my money?
Right.
Wait a second.
Yeah. Well, I called you the other day asking about a grant because it looked like a good opportunity for us. But when I looked at the awardee list, you guys were listed. So I didn't want to, impose on that or cross wires in the sense of compete necessarily for the same thing. Turns out that's not going to be the case, which is a good thing, but also being able to pick up the phone and have that conversation.
Exactly.
Because there are other organizations that I've not successfully been able to do that.
Yeah.
Either I get an answer that isn't fully transparent, or I don't get a call back.
Gotcha.
So, and can be challenging too. And that is a symptom, I think, of the sort of false competitiveness that's created out of trying to get this slice of pie out of whatever funding source it is. And we've talked about this in the first or second episode, is just ultimately going after resources that might even dilute what you do.
Right.
Because you're just trying to survive.
You got to keep the lights on. You got bills to pay. You got people that are working.
Yeah. And I think that is akin to this idea of like what we were just talking about with government being like, well, you're going to do it anyway. Just do it,
And so this is for where I think, and I would love to hear from more. My mindset has always been that this structure of the way nonprofits operate is the way it is. And so even on our website of Legendary Legacies, the title says we're an entrepreneurial nonprofit. And that has multiple meanings. One, we want everyone that are like wanting to go after their own goals internally as far as participants as well. But it's also of this mindset that like, I want to go find or create at some point for-profit entity that funds the nonprofit so that you don't have to be so reliant and dependent on that. We're nowhere near there yet, but that's like the trajectory at our next strategic plan, and having conversations about how do we build something like that, whether it be through leveraging real estate, whether it be through various other strategies that I'm unaware of, put them in the comments, that would allow us to have that residual funding on our own independently and manage it. Because unless the sector has a major epiphany, this is just the way it's going to be. And we know government moves at this glacial pace.
Yeah, and I think there have been significant and valid, in some cases, successful attempts. Social enterprise is one example.
But most of them don't generate revenue.
No, well, that's what I'm saying is like it's not for lack of trying. I think my point is that there's been, UTEC has, I think, done a good job also trying to replicate their micro enterprise model, starting with the mattresses. And, they've moved into different, I think they make almond butter. And
is that right?
They did at one point in cutting boards and things like that.
I know they did cutting boards. Yeah.
But then there's also sort of this sort of social investment forums, and where you in the state has tried to do the performance incentive programs. Jewish Vocational Services is a good example. There've been reentry grants, there've been housing grants, and Jewish Vocational Services back in the last few years got a grant for performance incentive to work with immigrant refugee populations in rapid employment, ESL. And you have private sector investors,
right?
You have the state guaranteeing. At least guaranteeing the grant or the loan, if you will, but they're through the work and results of the agent, the organization. There's lower payback than if you went and seeded a tech company or something like that. But the social venture capital component of it is a similar model. You're getting a lower rate of return.
My concern with that is that people will get comfortable with that progress and not push past that. Like, this is what we've done. And so continuing to have the sector continue to say that was great, but this isn't
but that's
the end all
I think
be
the
all.
sector
So I agree with what you're saying.
The sector has made these types of attempts to solve this issue and create more of an evergreen model, so you're not as reliant on public dollars that frankly are very prescriptive also, right. And with, like we've talked about at this point ad nauseum a little bit, is like being responsible with public taxpayer dollars.
No doubt.
And the prescriptiveness and rigidity associated with that. But I think because of that has pushed the sector to look more innovatively through social venture capital, through social enterprise, things like that. But maybe the next idea I would like to think is that, well, can we ourselves be our own solution by using the existing tools that we have to subcontract as a vehicle, to be able to mitigate cash flow issues, to partner for value to value with organizations where, we acknowledge we're not great at this thing, but, it's important to our community and our clients. And can we partner with an organization that, as a result of that partnership, the clients and we all get the mutual benefit, but also the smaller nonprofit may get growth out of it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we do that through not creating these like aftermarket solutions, but just the tools that we have, because it's just not that it's easy, but it might be easier than trying to fight the constant battles that we're fighting.
I was a part of an organization, they're still around. I'm just not as involved with them anymore. It was called Worcester Interfaith. It is called Worcester Interfaith. Yeah. Shout out Worcester Interfaith and Roberto Diaz in all that they do.
Former WCAC alumni.
That's right. That's right. And you guys, you have like a Belichickian.
We do. It's true.
A tree of employees.
The number of people I meet who tell me from generations of, I used to be in the previous version of YouthWorks, and now even our own staff who started as what YouthWorks used to be back in the day. We have board members. Gladys Rodriguez Parker always proudly says that she did her summer employment as a 14-year-old through WCAC. I meet people all the time that tell us. But we've been around for 57 years, so we know some people. Yeah.
Yeah. But Worcester Interfaith, we're working with a group of religious institutions, hence interfaith. And the idea was around organizing and saying, like, as these churches, mosques, and temples, why wouldn't we all choose to bank at the same bank, right? Mm-hmm. So that we could leverage that money to be like, this is what we're hoping to do with these loans. Because it's the power in numbers. Right. So I think about that even in the nonprofit sector. Like, what would that look like if folks were like, hey, we're going to all be at X bank and there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, $500 million a year that is coming through so how can we leverage the way that works? It's just how it is. Like how can we leverage the way it works against the system as well?
Yeah. We'll use what's out there. Use the system. That's rather than create something like what's there to use to our benefit.
Right.
Other people have figured it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, we have that's a good point. We have a lot of relationships with the banks. We can have those conversations.
Well, I just started thinking about it because, and I know it's in jest, but just being out locally, we bank with Webster 5. And so like people will ask, like, who do you bank with? And it's like, oh, really? Like, and it's like this, like.
There's a little community bank competitiveness.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like this interesting thing too. Yeah. The other thing was recently.
Well, banks have consolidated over, like, look at all the bank consolidation.
They do.
They did that.
Yeah.
They consolidated.
They did. I was in Washington, D.C. There's some pictures that are coming up right now. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the magic of editing. Mm-hmm. But I was in D.C. at the Comprehensive Opioid Stimulant and Substance Use Program National Forum. COSIP. National Forum. And for me, also, we talk about dollars. What I was grateful for and how I got there was the Anu, who is our program manager at the state level of DPH. Mm-hmm. She's the one who told us about it. Yeah. And she was like, hey, there's this forum that you guys should go to, and you can use some of the dollars in the training budget to cover the cost to go down there and be there. And part of that, though, was because... Which
is funny because we share a different funder that's under the same executive agency as HHS. DPH is in HHS.
Yep.
Our other funder is also, it's HHS.
Yep.
Won't let us do out-of-state conferences.
I hope I didn't get anybody in trouble.
But that's what, it's, yeah.
But that was on a national level for us. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea that this funding stream was there. So this was underneath the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And so underneath the Bureau of Justice Assistance is SAMHSA and all these other things. And so we got to meet one of the directors at the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and they give out over $5 billion a year to nonprofits, right? Yeah. And so just to be in the room, to be in that space, to have those conversations, I think about that also locally, larger nonprofits, or even our community foundations. How can you introduce folks? Where do we create spaces for them to meet the private donors? Because that's also a very difficult thing for a startup nonprofit. Fundraising is hard, but then that second part, getting in the door and building that relationship initially with a private funder and philanthropist, that's daunting to go in and try to pitch your need, right? And that sometimes feels weird. It's what I'm doing is really important. It is please invest in these.
And then they ask a deflating question, what's the difference between you and them?
So I think cultivating more of those opportunities for smaller nonprofits, larger nonprofits maybe have some of those, but it would take a different mindset in saying that there are more resources in this pseudo competitiveness that sometimes exists.
Well,
and here's the thing: I want to be fully transparent in that there are certainly times that comes up for me too.
Yeah,
it's Should I don't know. I don't know if that's going to affect them. Do I want to be open about we're going after this grant, especially as we're growing? Like those are real challenges.
Yeah, you have to play your hand too.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my origin story episode that I worked at a place at the Boston Foundation and ran something called SkillWorks.
Yeah.
It's a funder collaborative focused on workforce development, but a funder collaborative is an interesting model because you bring multiple funders together. So we had banks at the table, we had TBF at the table, City of Boston at the table, and then we had family foundations, private foundations. So we're 10 or 11 funders at the table, all with the mutual interest of helping support education and training for people, low income individuals in Boston across sector-based strategies. So that the mutual goal was, can we build capacity in the sector? Can we focus on education and training in high demand sectors like healthcare, green jobs, et cetera? And can we also advocate for policy around that? That was kind of the three-pronged approach, but all of the funders at that table were there for those reasons. And they pooled their dollars to help fund SkillWorks so we could fund those three areas and do work in those three areas. So there are examples of where funders are coming together. And that model, SkillWorks, has been replicated 30 plus times over across the US. And there's even a national fund for workforce solutions of which it's modeled on. And they have JP Morgan Chase and like big heavy hitters at the table. Yeah. So that pooling of resources to sustain interest also, and with the idea that there's capacity building and long-term investment, creates an incredible amount of flexibility. It did for us as SkillWorks, but we were a funder. We were funding organizations like ours to do work, and we were able to, because of that flexibility and the back end through the pool of resources, say we can invest for 2 years at a time. We can invest without the rigidity of this issue over here, and we don't have to do as cost reimbursement. We can advance X amount your first quarter, whatever. Right. So that those things exist. It's just how do you find out about it, or how do you develop something locally, and two, how do you then navigate it?
I think what you just said there made me also think of the fact that, how do you find it? I remember talking with one of our program officers from the state, and she had mentioned 2 grants to me, and I all right, so where do I find them? And she was like, I sent them to you for that reason. And there's no comprehensive database of all.
There's Compass, which or it used to be called Compass. It's very hard to navigate as a tool.
Oh, well, when I asked her, what is there a comprehensive list of all the departments in all the grants? I'm on Combis. I can go search that. I can go search Combis. Yeah. But it's cumbersome, and it's not just nonprofit stuff on Combis. Yeah. It's everything.
All the procurement.
Yeah, all the procurements is there. But grants under education, grants under reentry, grants under housing, it doesn't exist. And so really the way it's set up right now is it's who you know. Yeah. And if you know them, then you can get to it. Yeah. And so that network also exists and keeps people out from being able to connect into it, which is
the closest thing I can think to that might exist is some mass budget tracks the state budget.
That's what I was told. You can go to the budget.
You can, they parse it out by housing, by education. So you can look at line items. You have to know what line item you're looking for and know that line item results in some agency issuing an RFP for grants.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so say I'm a $150,000 nonprofit who's doing work in the community.
The transactional cost of you doing that, not happening.
Trying to find time to go and then understand that that's there or how to navigate it.
Yes.
Right.
That might have to be a resource that the ripple effect works on.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there are sources, you're signed up on all kinds of newsletters and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually you're ignoring all your
so many. So let me tell you something about our visual field. Mm-hmm. So it's actually really bad for your memory to put something up. So similar to email, I'm going to put that one. Or if you put I'm going to put this right by my mirror so I read it every day. Mm-hmm. It actually is terrible because the way the brain works is you normalize your visual field. And so it actually just becomes blank to
You're
you.
telling me that the 500 Post-it notes in my office reminding me to do things?
They're just there now. Now your wall's just pink.
That is true sometimes, because there months will go by and that Post-it note will not have been removed. And I'm like, do I need to do that still? Is that important? Yes. It's like cleaning out your closet.
Right?
I haven't worn this.
Cleaning out my closet.
I haven't worn this in 5 years. So yes, I used to karaoke that song in a very bad way, like in terms of skill set.
Oh, I was going to say, is there a good?
No, I mean, no.
You just weren't.
Just not
Your
good.
vocals weren't.
I'm not a singer. No.
I gotcha. I like to sing. I don't know if I do it well, but I like to do it.
I sing. I do a lot of.
Shoo-be-doo. That's not bad.
It's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like la 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 la.
Put some auto-tune on it.
Yeah, auto-tune that. T.I. can't sing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of artists only are famous because they're auto-tuned and they look good.
Oh, I only look good.
And they're blocking the access of other artists. Yes. Which is why the blind singer is supposed to be helpful. I don't know about that. I don't watch that. But.
Are you plugged into the song that is sweeping America and actually came up in the Republican debate called Rich Men in North of Richmond?
No.
You don't know about this song?
Are you going to sing it for us?
Do you know about this song, Mario? Did you listen to it? It's a powerful song.
Who is there? Somebody famous that sings
No,
it?
he's famous now.
Okay.
Yeah, he was just some dude out in West Virginia, I think.
What's the summary of the song?
So think of rich men. It's a play on words.
It's like tenant. Yeah. Okay.
Dead ant. Dead ant. Dead ant. Dead ant. Dead ant. Dead ant. Sorry.
I do love Inspector Gadget.
Dead ant. Dead ant. Now I'm completely lost.
Yeah, where were
I don't
we?
know.
Richmond, yeah.
Northmen. So rich men, north of Richmond, Virginia. So he's talking about people in Washington.
Okay.
And the whole thing is that he's getting at the fact that they only care about themselves. And America is the way it is because of Richmond and Richmond. Richmond, north of Richmond. That's the real summary. But he sings with such passion. And it transcends, in my opinion, all demographics because of what he's singing about. It kind of starts out like, I work, and we'll put a link in the show notes. But he starts out with lyrics around, I work all day, overtime pay, to come home, to get drunk just to go do it again.
Yeah. It's a simulation.
Right? Like, and I don't make enough. And he just talks about how things shouldn't work the way they do. And he talks about the system a little bit. But that's the premise of it. And it's gone viral. And I don't know if it'll change anything, but I will say that it was a question at the Republican primary, like this song that's sweeping the nation. Like, what do you think about that? Why do you think it resonates with so many people?
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the contentious debate in our political and social arena and cultural arena. Is like of people who feel like they've been left behind, and that does cut across not all demographics, and it bifurcates us at the same time too. And meanwhile, we keep the same people in power.
But I think so. This is going to be a little contrived, but in some ways, the play on this is that there's the elite and the non-elite. And if I can get the non-elite to think that they're all individuals instead of just not the elite like I am, then I win. Because you'll fight each other and not fight me. It's the Bacon's Rebellion, right? Like Bacon's Rebellion, the elite at the time and early settlers, they came. And actually, this was highlighted at the Worcester Community Action Council annual meeting.
Or Resiliency Awards?
The first year I was there. That was one of them.
Oh, no, our Anti-Poverty Forum.
No, not the Anti-Poverty Forum. I was anti-Poverty Forum.
You were on the panel for that.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were.
Oh, at that time I wasn't anti-Poverty Forum.
Jost and Nancy Wagman from I wasn't.
You want to hear something fascinating about that no one else knows about that? So this is sad, but I can laugh about it now because no one knew this. So I do remember being on the panel and they were asking me questions and I was sharing about the work we do with the young men and I started crying. I wasn't crying about that work. I got divorced. I was in the middle of a divorce and like I had found out like 2 weeks before that. And so the tears were because of that. But the timing worked out. The timing worked out. Oh people were like, this guy's really, whoa, man. Yes. And so like no one else knew that, but I left him at home.
I was not executive director at the time. Jill DeGillis was still here. That was her last forum. Yeah. And that was like, we haven't really we've had one forum since, and then COVID came and then we kind of switched to virtual kind of events, but we are actually speaking that one of the
Webster Lake. The one I was thinking of was at Webster Lake.
Oh, was it WCAC? That usually is an all staff meeting.
That's what it was then.
Oh, okay.
That's what it was then. Okay. And it was the first one you were there for. You had some folks from Boston
the YW,
Y come and share.
And we did that thing on intersectionality that went over like a lead balloon.
It did, but I was there for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was too much too soon.
But
now we're doing a better job of all that. Yes.
But they highlighted it there, which I was familiar with before. But Bacon's Rebellion, there were a group of settlers, and as the indentured servants, actually, some people attest that Bacon's Rebellion was the first time that race was weaponized. And so during this, they would work 7 years and then you get your, get your freedom. And so they would be like, all right, cool, you're good. And they'd be like, all right, I want some land. They'd be like, well, you got to go to the frontier, dude. And they'd be like, well, it's undeveloped, man. And they'd be like, yeah, I know. But if you want, you can come back and do another 7 years, man, or kind of go out there and fend for yourself against the Native Americans and all that. And so you had multiple different folks that were doing that, whether they were black, white, whatever. So eventually, like, Nathaniel Bacon got them together and were like, hey, look, dude, like, this is messed up. So they revolted against the elite. And that's when the elite said, oh, these white folks, they have a little bit more privilege than you. Because it wasn't even about that. It was about, how do I maintain my power? Power is the most intoxicating.
Yeah, of course.
Like literally, like fMRI scans.
And the fear of losing it.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, and I talked about this in terms of even just in community action and the rules and regulations. Like, we are an aftermarket solution to trying to address root causes of poverty.
Wow.
And we are beholden to a set of rules and regulations that make it difficult to solve poverty. But I think we do a good job keeping people's head above water.
Yeah.
But it's really hard because of the rules and regulations, like not being able to charge indirect or go to out-of-state conferences to learn about,
how to
best
do what
practices,
I'm doing better.
Or not force people to jump through 15 hoops to get rent relief and, a $600 heating benefit. Is we are not, and my role here, I feel like, is not necessarily to lead a traditional community action program, but in the context of what's happening now in this world today, is, can I change the business model? Which is why our resiliency center has been created, and trying to shift the thinking and the mindset of client-centered mobility and economic empowerment, and not just focusing on how to move people over hurdles, but how do we help people work with people side by side, not just keeping their head above water, but can we build a boat with them, and not just say, here's this menu of things that you get to choose from, but say, like, what are your goals? Like, if it is as small of a goal as you and I might think it might be a big goal for an individual or a family. Like, let's help that person get to that goal, and then get to the next one. And
you got to report out what was the benefit, right?
Yes.
So you did that and you helped them. So what was the impact? What did we get from that?
Interesting that you mentioned this. So right before I walked into this podcast conversation, which has been a winding road today, is I was talking about our impact report, which is it's a nationally required set of frameworks of metrics, and it is entirely based on counts of service, not on what the service did for the individual.
Did they call them units? How many units did you serve?
Indicators.
Oh.
Yes. And so we just count how many people got out of a service, but no one asks us what.
They just want the output. Yes. What's the output?
Yeah. And what does that do? I mean, it's fine to count how many people you're working with.
Well, they want to know cost per person.
Right, exactly. Unit costs.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
The ARPA grants have been based on, well, what's your cost per unit? You mean like how much are we helping a person?
I'm telling you, that term unit has got to get removed from funders' language, man. That's just so dehumanizing.
Yeah, but I think, if there is a theme we can identify in this particular conversation is back to the sort of Richmond, north of Richmond. I said that right?
You did.
In the tenants of all of this, not the tenants or tenants, but the tenants is as nonprofits, how do we figure out how to self-innovate, right? And motivate and maybe rebel a little bit too. 100%. Maybe we have to say, and we do this, we're doing with this with SSYI, like we have acknowledge and recognize that we are not the right lead expert for this. So we're saying no to that component of those funds.
Yep.
We're saying we can do this other piece that we are better at.
Yep.
And saying no to resources that are going to dilute our expertise while also fighting ways to support the structural elements of what makes the wheels turn of an organization this size.
And we at LL are also saying no right now, based on, at the top of the conversation, what we talked about. If it's going to dilute the efficacy of our work, then we're not going to serve more just because you want us to.
Yeah.
So
there's a little bit of rebellion, and I think that
I don't even know if that's rebellion.
It's not rebellion, but it's a seed.
See how they try to put us in a position where we feel like we don't deserve, like that's we deserve to be able to make that decision.
That case. Yes.
Yeah, this isn't, it's not rebellious.
But even talking, maybe rebel. Well, no, it's even the idea that we can vocalize that and be annoyed by it or mad by it or rebel against it is we ought to be able to feel confident that we can do that without getting penalized too.
Sure.
Like, oh, well, if you don't want this funding, then don't bother coming back.
Sure.
So, or don't tick off people that are funding you or people that make decisions around the fiscal year budget. And it's like, well, we should be able to have a conversation and be open and transparent about what our needs are and how we can actually help people versus how many I's we have to dot and T's we have to cross.
I's we dot and T's we cross. So many.
Maybe that's the episode name.
The thing that was, this is probably, I don't know if we can close on this, but I think about the reporting piece that they want from the federal government, local government and all that. But I also ask, and I don't know the answer. If someone does, please tell me. We've given billions of dollars, and this is not to discredit Ukraine in their plight, but I don't know if Ukraine has to report back what they did with their money. Mm-hmm. But those are taxpayers' dollars.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot of places. And you've got organizations like yours, mine, and various others who are doing hard work in the trenches, filling gaps all over the place. But we've got to report out, like, even ahead of time sometimes, what we did.
I don't have a problem reporting things. I have a problem reporting things that don't mean anything for the sake of reporting something. I don't have a problem being honest about like, this didn't work and this is...
No, absolutely not.
Or we did this awesome thing and we want to talk. I don't have any problem, although like I've said before, I'm not great at, always talking about the stuff that we do. What I think in terms of like on this line of like rebellion and to crossing I's and dotting T's or whatever it is, we ought to be able to make a case without jumping through 9 million hoops, right? We ought to be able to be trusted for the knowledge and the expertise that we have, and to do that with the trust that we're going to be able to deliver services in an effective way.
Right.
And not constantly have to prove that over and over and over and over and over again, and try to prove things that don't actually have value to the people we're trying to help.
So we'll wrap on this I don't mind reporting, but let me report on what I want to report on.
Yeah.
I will show you the indicators of what my work does because your indicators may not. So that's what I'm getting at, similar to what you're saying. Like, I don't want to report out on things that don't happen.
The Ukraine example is something that's a constant source of tension, and that is happening right here right now. The debate with the number of Haitian migrants coming that we're housing in hotels as a state, while also challenged with affordable housing and homelessness, which
we knew about for 2 years.
Well,
it's happening.
More than that, but we ought to be able to, as we at the top of this, talking about the American experience and not being isolationists, which I think is part of the value of the establishment of the United States, is that we move through isolationism, is that we ought to be able and be a world leader and be a world coalescer and support efforts in the world that are humanitarian while also doing the same for ourselves. And there is so much money to do that. If you read the Poverty by America, Matthew,
I have it.
You have it. Yeah. Matthew, he gets deep right into it about how much money is allocated by government that never actually trickles down, that never really gets spent. And then there's, fraud things. So we get a lot of pressure put on us of like mitigating fraud or avoiding fraud at the client level.
Right.
When other states are like Brett Favre and his son got in trouble for like buying SUVs through their HHS department.
Remember
using TANF money,
Remember Kurt Schilling?
Oh yeah, Rhode Island gaming, yeah. But that kind of stuff is like and that's just one example.
Understood. It's contrived,
an outlier. But the point he's making is like there's billions of dollars that are allocated across agency that ultimately never get down to the ground
where it's supposed to do the work.
But his point is like there's a ton of money out there. We can help Ukraine and Afghanistan and do this other thing too. But we just can't. The bureaucracy and the fear of loss of power gets in the way.
This is The Ripple Effect. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends. And this is episode 4. So
this is episode 4.
Yeah, we made it to 4 episodes. So the next one will be 5.
Keep on talking.
You're going to get the double digits pretty soon.
That's one season is 12. So we're a third of the way through.
Absolutely.
Some more wild winding.
Also, there's going to be a steak off at some point.
Oh my gosh. There is. Yes, there is.
We'll check you out next time.
I got the Traeger going. I know how to use it now.
Peace.
You're listening to The Ripple Effect, a nonprofit imperative with Waddell and Marybeth Campbell. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you on the next one.